Our time is 10 o'clock and we will be starting our webinar. My name is Maria. I'm from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, and I will start by introducing our panelists, and Tapio will take over. Before I introduce our panelists, or before we proceed to introducing our panelists, I would just like to start with the ground rules. If you would like to speak, please raise your hand. Do not just rush to speak. And we also recommend that as you join the meeting, please mute your mic. Yes, Robina, I see you're raising your hand. Robina, your hand is raised. Maybe I'll take it that was an error. So once you've raised your hand and you've been given a chance to speak, once you've spoken or you've asked your question, you can then, you're required to put your hand down. I will hand over to Tapiwa, who's going to introduce our guests and welcome us all to this webinar. Thank you. Over to you, Tapiwa.
Thank you very much, Maria. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Thank you. A warm welcome once again to everyone that has joined this call, and happy International Women's Day. I know it was on the 8th of March, but as the ZSE, we are celebrating today with all the ladies that are here present. So thank you once again for joining. As introduced, my name is Tapio Bebe. I'm from the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange. I'm the Marketing and Corporate Affairs Manager at the ZSE. And it gives me great pleasure to welcome the amazing women that will be on the panel list today. For starters, we've got Emilia Chipanguza, who is from Platinum Securities, based here in Zimbabwe. And we also have Nicola Komnos, who is from the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. On the call, we've got our partner, CFA Society South Africa, represented by Lucille and Delphine Govender. So they're going to be speaking later on. And thank you very much once again for joining. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our first speaker today, who is Emilia Chipanguza. I will just give you a brief intro of Emilia as she takes to the floor. So Emilia is currently working as a senior dealer with the Platinum Securities Group, overseeing the day-to-day equity sales function for Platinum Securities. She's got over 8 years working experience in various capacities, spanning from treasury operations, equities research, and also equities trading. She has worked at Telecel Zimbabwe. She has also worked at Interhorizon, and she also worked at Agriport Securities, where she also played a lead senior role as senior associate for the trading team. She is a registered member of the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange, and we are happy to have Emilia as part of the panelists today. Thank you, Emilia, for agreeing to speak to us today as women, and I'll now hand over the virtual podium to you to conduct your presentation.
Okay, thank you, Tapio, and thank you as well for inviting me to speak today. Thank you to everyone who's here as well. It's such a pleasure to be among all you amazing women, as well as gentlemen, if there are any gentlemen as well. Thank you, guys. So I'm just going to share my presentation. I think, Tapio, you can then just confirm if you can see it.
Yes, we can see it, Emilia. You can proceed.
Thank you. So I'm sure we all know that this month is International Women's Month. So I think the theme for Women's Month is ringing the bell for gender equality, which is gender equality today for a sustainable tomorrow. I'm guessing this is something that we talk of a lot, but we constantly have to remind each other of what it actually means and how we can actually achieve that. So just a brief introduction is I'm just going to speak on the challenges that we face in the financial sector, as well as why we face such issues, and part of my experiences in the financial services sector. So obviously the main issue is that of attracting and retaining diverse talent within the financial sector. And by diverse, today we're talking mainly about gender diversity. So although we have this challenge, but I'm glad to say that we have at least the support staff that are being represented by women. But we're just saying today that's not enough. There needs to be more women in leading roles, which we haven't been seeing. But you know, we're growing, but we need to see a lot more of. So, I mean, what are some of the benefits of having gender equality to the economy and to our capital market? So I think I was just reading up a lot. The UN speaks a lot on this gender equality. They say it is estimated that companies with 3 or more women in senior management functions score higher in terms of all dimensions of organizational performance. So I mean, what exactly does that mean? We see a lot. I mean, I think it's now being spoken of quite often that women in general have better work ethic. So I think anyone can ask questions as I go along, because I think some people might not even be in agreement with some of the statements that are said out there. But feel free to ask any questions as I go along. But it's been said that women actually have better work ethics than men. So what exactly does that mean? So that's just generally being on time. You talk of simple things like being on time for a meeting. There's no need to stereotype and say men can't do the same. But in general, women actually know how to be there on time. In general, more organized. So we say we want more women that are organized for support as support staff, but we used to say we don't need a lot more of that as well in leadership roles as well. That's what we actually now need. Women that are more organized and not just for back office operations or support staff, but also just front office operations and leading and management roles. Some of the benefits as well include gender equality can also just be crucial to increase the stock of human capital within the economy. So sometimes you find that employment is not actually happening as much as it should, mainly because there isn't enough skill set. But there actually is. It's just that we're not looking at also expanding on our pool of talent that we're looking at. Let's look at more women. That way you can actually increase the human capital in the economy. Gender equality can also foster higher labor productivity, like I mentioned before, just being there on time and being more organized as women. And then I think there's also an economic case for gender equality, which emphasizes that the economic benefit of gender equality at a macro level, which recognizes the cost of non-equality and starts viewing gender equality as a form of investment. By that, it's just, you know, you're looking at staff, retaining staff. I will touch on this a bit more when it comes to retaining staff, but in general, women could actually stay in jobs for longer than men. A perception that's actually not viewed quite often, but it's actually a way of just saying, as a way of investment for organizations, they can start to widen their view on gender equality. So my journey in the capital market as a woman in leadership, I think I'll just start off with where I began. So currently I'm a stockbroker with Platinum Security, but I didn't always start off there. I actually started off as an analyst with Inter Horizon. That's where I began my journey in capital markets. I began as an analyst, but also just worked my way up into trading as well. I think I was doing both trading and analytical work, as a research analyst. But with time, I think I then started to see where I was more inclined to succeed more, as well as my bosses as well. They could see that, oh, I could actually take on the challenge of being a trader a lot more than being an analyst. So, I mean, this is something that's actually been quite an interesting journey for me, because as a broker, it's not easy for a lot of women. I'm sure Tapia can confirm that there isn't a lot of women in stockbroking in Zimbabwe. Very few of us. And part of the reasons why that might be, according to what I've gone through, is more to do with being a broker, especially being a successful broker, is more measured by your relationships rather than your skill set or what you bring to the table, but it's more about relationships. And as women, that's quite a challenge. Sorry, excuse me. As women, that's quite a challenge for us, because in terms of relationships and maintaining those relationships, we actually have to do a lot more than what men go through to maintain relationships that will make sure we keep getting those trades. So I wouldn't want to touch a lot more on that, but it's more, is the relationship based on me giving you the flows for trades, or is it about, is it about flirting? What is it about? For women, it's a whole different issue. It's not just any simple relationship, and that's what I've gone through. But I've managed to actually go past that and keep creating those relationships, no matter what it's based on, and maintain those relationships. And then, where am I going in terms of my career as a stockbroker? So I would like to remain a stockbroker for the foreseeable future, but is it actually sustainable? As a woman, is it sustainable? So we talk of the things that we struggle with for it to be sustainable, for us to remain as in the market as stockbrokers. Those things could be when you're starting a family. I might get that distraction where I'm starting a family, and I might not have enough time at work, and also to maintain those relationships that I talk of that are very critical in our industry. But that's something that even other men see as well, that, oh, okay, Emilia has been in the industry. Is she actually gonna last? Because it's not like most of the women that have been stockbrokers last, because they end up starting families, and when they do, they never actually come back, or they don't manage to get back those relationships that they had built before. So I definitely would like to remain a stockbroker. So I'll just touch more on what sort of initiatives need to happen to bridge that gap. I'll just talk on that now. So some of the things that we can work on in terms of everyone as a market, be it male or female, to bridge that gap, is to shift the way we think as organizations, as individuals, as women, as men, to just shift in both the structure and culture of how we do things. So this may come from inventive and coordinated diversity, including strategies from management at management level, strategies on how that can change, as well as a stronger emphasis on holding managers and leaders accountable for change. So women tend to be stereotyped as being risk averse. I think I should have touched on that when I was talking about my experiences. As a female, they always talk of women are not as aggressive when it comes to actually closing a deal. What exactly does that mean? Because we're both bringing the same thing onto the table, but there's just this stereotype around a woman not closing a deal because they don't have a certain aggression that's expected of them. So what can actually be done? If you're saying we're risk averse, can they not be training in organizations for women to actually prepare them for board and senior management roles that make them more aggressive? Why should we just shun it and say, oh, it's women that are not as aggressive naturally to women? What if it just takes training for women to be prepared for that? There's also need to have maybe a minimum threshold for women in leadership as well. In a way, as part of a sustainability index methodology. So that could include diversity on leader scoreboard. So whenever somebody is hiring within the unit, they also need to just look at having a mix of both male and female, and not just look at, okay, a male would deliver on this part as opposed to a woman, but just making sure that you have that balance. You might be shocked at who actually deliver a lot more. And then I think also, especially when you're looking at Zimbabwe, there's a lack of role models in terms of women that actually stay in the market. Like I said, there isn't enough women in stockbroking. Yes, there is role models who are out there, but we just don't know of it yet. So I think even the ZSE can assist in this on just letting us know all the women that have made it, all the women that have, because it's not said enough, the women that have made it, and how they managed to navigate the challenges. And as women, we need to just speak more on what we go through and how we can navigate it, so that everyone's just aware of, so that if there's anyone who's looking out to be in the capital market as a female, they can actually just look up to certain women as well who've made it. And then lastly, I'll just talk on the lack of flexibility, flexible work arrangements. So as women, we tend to be, we end up having to choose between families and careers, which is very apparent, especially in the financial services sector, where they say, if you've gone 3 months without talking to certain clients, you've lost touch, which shouldn't be the case, where as a woman, I'm having to choose between my career and family. So, with any working environment, if the working hours are flexible, some organizations can experience a higher turnover of female employees if that's not there. Which means that organizations can actually lose on valuable talent, because you're saying you can't actually get back to who you were because you've gone to start a family, but then you're back. And you tend to actually lose continuity in projects and client relations, and incur costs when replacing these employees. But needless to say, it's not all gloomy for women, especially in them. We're starting to see a lot more organizations shifting towards diversity, especially within the capital markets. And like I said before, it might actually also be because of work ethic, but also just continuity as well. The fact that we are stereotyped as risk averse may actually be an advantage for us at the moment, because of that, they think, oh, women will actually stay at a job for longer, so I'm better off actually hiring a woman. So we're not yet there where we're saying as women we're being hired for our skills, but at least we're making some sort of progress where they're saying, oh, women, they stay longer at jobs because they're not looking for much, which is terrible, sure, but at least we're being recognized. So I think that's it from me. Thank you, guys. I don't know if you have any questions.
Thank you very much, Emilia. I do not see any hands up at the moment. I'm not sure if this means that it's been clear and you're very loud and clear. So I don't see any hands up. I know Tapiwa has just raised a hand, so maybe we'll take a question from Tapiwa.
Thanks, Emilia. For me, it's not a question, but actually wanting to thank you for what you've just said, because surely when I also joined the financial, the capital markets, you know, it's really male dominated, and you are just trying to find your space and seeing how best you can do it. You're a woman, you're a mother, you're a wife, everything. So it's also just matter of just balancing and standing by your principles. So thank you very much for actually sharing your journey with us. I really appreciate it. And I think I'll engage you outside this firm so that at least we can talk more, because some of the things that you really raised, you have done well for yourself, and just learning from you how best you tackle certain situations that might come. As you're saying, you were talking about flirting. How do you balance it? Because if you're nice maybe to someone else, they think that no, you're flirting, but you're just being nice. How do you then balance it all? So I just wanted to say thank you for stating what we go through as you join the capital markets. And also there is hope that, okay, if someone has made it, it means it's possible. You just have to strike a balance. So that's what I just wanted to say.
Thank you, Tapiwa. Thank you very much, Emilia. I don't know if you have any other questions or contributions. It appears there are no other hands up. Thank you very much, Emilia, for the insightful presentation. I'm sure a lot of us can relate to the content that you just mentioned. Thank you very much. Without much ado, we'll proceed with our program. My apologies, we had not mentioned how our program is going to run through. I will just do a run through of our program before we proceed to the next speaker. So first of all, it was the welcome and introduction of speakers, which was done by Tapiwa, and then the presentation by Emilia. And now we're in the question and answer segment. And from 10:30 to 10:45, we will proceed to our next speaker, Nicola Komninos, and then we'll have a question and answer section. And then we'll proceed from there from round about 11 to get a brief on the CFA South Africa Society by Delphin. And thereafter, we'll have our vote of thanks from Tapiwa. So I will proceed to introduce our next speaker, Nicola Komninos. Nicola Komninos is the Group Chief Risk Officer of the JSE, the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. She chairs the JSE Pension Fund Board, JSE Executive Investment Committee, and the CFA South Africa Society Risk, Governance and Audit Committee. She serves on various industry committees, including World Federation of Exchanges Risk Working Group Vice Chair, Institute of Risk Management of South Africa's Board, Vice President, and co-head of Women in ETF South Africa chapter. With over 15 years of experience in financial markets, her previous roles include Managing Director of Nautilus Group, a hedge fund platform, and head of various functions including group strategy, sustainability, equities and equity derivatives, business intelligence at the JSE. Previous industry roles include investment consulting and life investment product development. Nicola's qualifications include a CFA charter holder, BCom honors and BCom investment management degrees, both cum laude. She was awarded IRMSA 2020 Risk Manager of the Year, and her team was awarded the IRMSA Industry Specific Initiative Award in the Financial Service category in 2021. She's passionate about mentorship, financial inclusion, and transformation. This is all about Nicola Comninos, our next speaker. I will hand over the platform to Nicola. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Maria, for a very humbling introduction. Can you hear me okay and see me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Thank you. I think it's such a great honor to be part of your Market Open. And I think just also following on the presentation from Emilia, I think Emilia, you yourself are certainly setting a beautiful example of a mentor and a sponsor and a leader for gender equality in the Zimbabwean market. So I'm hoping that this session potentially plants the seed for future collaboration and engagement between ourselves. I've got a couple of ideas already. I know we've already partnered with yourself through the CFA Institute, which is this event that we're hosting with you now. But as you heard in the introduction, I also am the co-head of Women in ETFs, which is a South African chapter, but it's a global organization and they're really wanting to expand globally. And they've got some really exciting mentorship programs that they run. So it'll be really great if either you guys, everyone on the line is obviously welcome, but I'd love to partner maybe with yourselves, Tapiwa, Maria and Emilia, to potentially set up a chapter in Zimbabwe, to have your own Women in ETFs chapter, which is really all about promoting gender equality and to Emilia's point, just provide a structured sort of platform where you are then able to tap into mentors or sponsors or other female leaders that have gone ahead of you. And you could always get some of the global leaders to get involved in your mentorship program, and they can talk about the journey they've walked to get to where they are today. And certainly, as Emilia, as you were going through the stats and just talking generally about gender equality and obviously still quite a male-dominated setup, even in Zimbabwe. I think in South Africa, it's pretty similar. And even in engaging with others in the European and the US and Asian regions, you're probably overestimating if you say that there's potentially 30% of the individuals around the table could potentially be female. That certainly is an ambition of the 30% club, and where they want to take gender equality is they'd want to get at least 30% participation of women at executive level, at the board level. And that's another institution that we could partner with, that certainly we have partnered with as Women in ETFs, the chapter in South Africa. So I'm hoping that those are a few food for thought ideas in terms of how we can collaborate. And then I'm just going to share my screen. And if you can just confirm if you can see that on your side, Maria.
Yes, it's clear.
Great, thank you. So I think just following on all the wonderful gems and insights that Emilia has shared, I want to just build on that conversation and talk about gender equality today for a more sustainable tomorrow. And it really builds on the theme that UN Women has set out for us for this ringing the bell of gender equality, which, by the way, obviously happened a couple of days ago. And we at the Johannesburg Stock Exchange partnered with over 100 other exchanges all over the world, where we all rang the bell for gender equality, specifically focusing on the theme of gender equality, but wanting to make sure that we build on that for a more sustainable economy. And what I added in my specific presentation is that I wanted to talk a little bit about coding heart into a world economy. I think it's so important that we lead with heart, and we as women can do it so beautifully. And the reason I wanted to specifically bring that theme through today is just that we really need to take a bit of time and just think about those that are affected by the very sad and heart-wrenching situation that's currently unfolding between the Ukraine and Russia. I think another child hospital was bombed the other day. And I think it's so important for us as women to make sure that we speak up about these things and that we influence and we effect change in a way that the world thinks about these things differently. So that's why I thought, let me talk about sustainability and talking about coding heart into the world economy. So the first thing I wanted to do is I wanted to challenge each and every one of you. And if you want to use the chat box function, I think we're all on MS Teams. Sorry, I'm just getting an echo. If you can just mute yourselves. If you want to use the chat box functionality, please drop in there how you are ensuring that we build a more sustainable tomorrow through gender equality today. So what are the things that you're doing potentially in the organization that you're working at, or in your own personal capacity? What are the things that you're doing to make sure that we build a more sustainable tomorrow through enabling gender equality? And while you're busy trying to find your chat box function on MS Teams, I'm going to give you a few ideas of the types of things that you can do. And hopefully, Emilia, enticing you and Tapiwa and Maria to partner with me on some of these elements, because these are certainly things that I'm quite passionate about and that I get involved in my own personal time, where I provide pro bono support for these types of organizations. So the ones that you're seeing on the screen now, Women in ETFs is also a non-profit organization, as I've mentioned, a global organization really focusing on gender equality and creating a platform where women can connect with other men and women. And it's key when I say men as well, because the reality is to have gender equality, we can't just have women around the table, because then we've created more gender inequality. We need to have a good balance of both men and women around the table. So we create that sort of platform, and we run mentorship programs, university outreach programs, really a wonderful initiative and a wonderful organization that's tapped in globally across the world. The other one, which is a partner of this event today, CFA Society. I'm one of the proud members of the South African Society. Certainly some wonderful work, and Delphine Govender will talk a little bit about it later today, but we have some specific scholarships available for women to make sure that we have more women that are able to complete the CFA designation, get the right level of support so that we get more CFA charter holders that are female. We also do lots of other initiatives, but one of the things I'm involved at CFA Society is SADC Outreach. And today's event is a beautiful example of exactly that. We partner with other countries in our border regions around SADC region to host events like what we're doing today, for women to connect with other women, or for women to connect with men and women, to make sure that we're able to share ideas in terms of how we can jointly build a more sustainable society. One of the charities that I'm quite passionate about, that I support in my personal capacity, but we as Women in ETF South Africa have also started supporting, is Dignity Dreams. And there's many of these types of NGOs, but one of them, and this one in particular, just does some wonderful work, because what they do is they provide reusable sanitary pads to girls in informal settlements. Some girls that end up spending 1 week every month potentially not going to school because they don't have sanitary wear, and they're potentially embarrassed or not feeling comfortable to go to school. They end up missing such a large portion of their curricula for that year that they potentially will end up having worse results, and might not even finish school. And so what Dignity Dreams does, and a wonderful lady, Sharon, which I'm very happy to introduce you guys to if you want to partner with her in any way or form, is they make sure that they distribute these reusable sanitary pads to keep girls in school. And the reason I wanted to use them as an example today is because it fits in so beautifully with the sustainability theme that the UN Women has put forward today, because we want to make sure that we promote gender equality for a more sustainable tomorrow. And that's exactly what they're doing, keeping girls in school to make sure that women also then proceed and they end up going through their school years and hopefully getting to university, and being able to get into the work environment. but also at the same time being environmentally friendly, because those reusable sanitary pads are actually a lot more eco-friendly than those that we potentially use, the tampons and whatever other products that we use that actually is just a once-off use product. So I myself am a big supporter of them. And then I wouldn't be a proud JSE employee if I wouldn't say to you that we've actually launched a gender neutral parental leave approach, which essentially means whether you're a woman or a man, you are able to go on 4 months maternity leave or paternity leave, whichever way you want to define it, to go and help raise your child, because it's so important for us as women, if we want to have a corporate career, to create a different type of environment, even within our households, where both men and women are responsible for raising the children, and both men and women are able to spend time to raise our little ones. So that's something I thought I'll also just share with you. And then in the middle of this slide, I talk about the Edelman Trust Barometer, which is a report that was launched earlier this year. And one of the things that just stood out for me in that report is that both NGOs as well as business have been rated as the most trusted organizations in this specific report. I welcome you to have a look at the report. But the reason I wanted to highlight that is that really puts then pressure on us as business leaders, whether you work for the JSE or the Zimbabwean Stock Exchange or for any other stockbroker in Zimbabwe or in another country. It's important for us as business leaders to step up and have a voice when it comes to some of the societal problems, partner with the NGOs and others in this space, and make sure that jointly we are able to build a more sustainable tomorrow. And essentially that report and the trust barometer that came out is a call to action for us as business leaders, as well as partnering with NGOs to make sure that we can effect that change. And these are some ideas of how you can do it. So I'm hoping you are able to find your chat function and you can let me know what are the things that you are doing to build a more sustainable tomorrow. Please do share that. I look forward to seeing some of your comments come through. So then to just take a slight gear change and just ask you about one concept of why would we even want to lead with heart? I mean, what would be the reason for that? It certainly wouldn't just be purely because it's a nice to have. And I think, Emilia, you underlined it beautifully with some of the evidence and the statistics you mentioned earlier when you said that there is reports out that women are potentially more productive in certain areas. Certainly there's reports out that women make very good portfolio managers and those sorts of things. So I think it's important to make sure that we understand also the practical benefits. And I wanted to just take a step back and take you back to the response of COVID-19 and which countries had the best responses to the pandemic. And in my view, those were all the women leaders across the world. We saw Germany, Taiwan, the New Zealand response, Iceland, Finland, Norway, Denmark. Those were the ones that really had some humane responses to COVID and the pandemic. And I think just generally, if you look at Jacinda Ardern, really is just a beautiful example of a female leader. Some of her press conferences, she even has her little baby with her, and she emphasizes the fact that you can be both a mother and you can be a leader. And her quote here on the page that just says, "I refuse to believe you cannot be both compassionate and strong," is just something that really resonates with me, because I do believe when you lead with heart, it doesn't mean you're weak. It doesn't mean that you're potentially not as strong as some of the men in the room or some of the other women that maybe don't come across as very compassionate. I think that's something, a balance that we as women can bring to the work environment. And I want to emphasize again, when I talk about gender equality, it's about making sure we've got both men and women around the table and a good balance of that. And then another role model, Kamala Harris in the US, one of the things that she said is, "I've had a lot of titles over my career, and certainly vice president will be great." And obviously she is the vice president now, and it is great. But Momala will always be the one that means the most. And that is really, we are the mothers of the next generation, and it's important for us to give that love and affection and lead with heart, irrespective of the role we fulfill in society. And then I want to go a little bit to the numbers on the statistics side. This is an Oxfam report that's a little bit dated, but it's still so powerful. If you look at the graphic here in the middle, the wealth of the richest 1% is twice as large as that of 92% of the poorest people in the world. So graphically, 1% of the richest pretty much have wealth that's twice the size of 92% of the poorest people in the world. So social inequality is such a crucial issue that we're all dealing with globally. And the the World Economic Forum issued their global risk report earlier this year, talking about another 51 million people moving to an extreme poverty globally off the back of the COVID pandemic. And then that visual you're seeing at the top right-hand corner of the slide, just showing you the digital divide. Those in yellow that have internet, and those in blue where there's population. And you can see there's lots of the world, and Africa, our continent that we're living in, pretty much overall 98% of our population doesn't have access to internet. So really critical for us to make sure that we do contribute either in our personal capacity or as businesses to closing that social divide and addressing the social inequalities. Because today we're really talking about sustainability. Sustainability talks about environmental, social, and governance issues. Wanting to make sure that the S in the ESG, the S in the middle, the societal issues, is addressed. And we can't have a healthy society that we are all leading together if we don't close these massive divide gaps. So I wanted to ask you another question, and this is probably more of a rhetorical question, is did COVID-19 widen the social inequality gap, or did it potentially just put a spotlight on the existing issue? And I would probably argue that it just put a spotlight on the existing issue, and certainly did add as the last straw on the camel's back in terms of further widening the inequality gap. But the inequality gap has been there and has been endemic for many years, and is something that globally the advanced economies have just sort of ignored. And I think COVID-19 has just made them realize and brought them back to reality when they're talking about vaccine inequalities. Some of the poorest countries in the world have only got like 5 to 10% of their populations vaccinated. Just highlights obviously the medical systems in some of those countries. So the reality is inequality exists, and we need to be very clear about what we are going to do to make a difference. And this talks again about the tangible benefits of leading with heart. It's a report from Deloitte, and they talk about how companies that have inclusive cultures. And when you talk about inclusive cultures, you talk about diversity. You have men and women around the table. You have people from different cultural backgrounds, different qualifications, etc. And when you have that inclusive culture, you are 2 times as likely to meet or exceed your financial targets. And this is based on real stats they did with companies all over the world. You are 3 times as likely to be a high-performing company, and you are 6 times more likely to be agile and innovative. You are 8 times more likely to achieve better business outcomes. So I think the stats are out there. It's been proven. Again, this was done in 2016, but it's a really powerful report. Thousands of individuals and companies included and surveyed as part of the study, and it really shows the benefit of diversity. And then one last stat from McKinsey and Company is also just the tangible benefit of leading with heart. Paying attention to environmental, social, and governance concerns does not compromise your returns. So there was this debate globally when we started seeing a lot of ESG funds coming up, funds that are more sustainability focused. When we talk about funds in the investment world, some of the asset managers providing and focusing more on companies that are listed, that are environmentally, socially, and governance more aware, focusing on ESG components. And there was this debate, well, if you invest in companies that focus more on ESG, it's more like you investing in an NGO or a non-profit organization. They won't have commercial benefits. And it's completely false information, because they did a study, McKinsey and Company, and over 2,000 results of the study was included. So a very statistically significant report, and it showed that the impact on ESG proportions on the equity returns, the share of the positive findings was 63% and the negative findings only 8%. So certainly it shows that in 63% of the cases, when they invested in companies that focused more on ESG, wanted to be more sustainable, they ended up in 63% of the cases having better returns. And having spoken, Emilia, as a stockbroker earlier, I mean, there's no other stats you want to see than actually wanting to outperform on your returns. And then I want to also just talk a little bit about the way that we're engaging with each other today. And I specifically included a picture of a man, because as I've said earlier, it really is important for us for gender equality to make sure that we have good, diverse teams of both men and women, and make sure that we have a people first approach, especially when we're in this virtual world. We have to make sure that we have authentic leadership and we have empathy. And we won't have enough time today to go through this video, but I've included a link in the presentation, and Tapiwe will send it to you afterwards, and you're welcome to have a look at that video from the World Economic Forum. They spoke about the 5 rules of working from home, which is a study that they did in partnership with the Harvard Business School. And I think those are just such wonderful gems that you can take away with you, which really is that they say you should be focusing on understanding the people's circumstances. They might have a little baby at home that they might have to take care of. So their working hours will be once the baby's asleep. So that's what might not be hard and fast between 8 and 5. So as leaders, we have to be flexible. We have to be inclusive. We have to be accommodating and understanding of our people's circumstances. So really powerful video if you have time to watch it. The next one is just focusing on wellness and well-being. In the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report that was issued earlier this year, they talk about mental health being deteriorated across the globe and becoming such a big risk for employers. Burnout risk, where your people are just 24/7, always connected on their phones, on their laptops. And so it's important for us as employers and us as human beings leading with heart to also focus and emphasize and lead by example and say to your team, take time off to do yoga. I myself did some yoga this morning. Take time for a walk in the garden, take time spending time with your children. You have to have a balanced life. We spend such long hours at the office and such long hours working. You have to make sure that you bring other elements into your life to have a full and fulfilled life. So that's something we also take quite seriously at the ZSE. We've actually created online lessons of yoga and fitness, etc. And obviously you don't have to do all of those. It's optional for half an hour early in the morning at 7 o'clock if you want to join that, or over lunchtime. You're welcome to click the link and online join a session so that you don't have to go to the gym, which is additional travel time, etc. So that's something that many organizations are also focusing on more. And then I'd be amiss if I talk about sustainability and ESG if I don't talk about climate change. I think all of us living on the African continent can see it on a real-time basis. We've had droughts, we've had floods. We've just recently seen in Mozambique also some hurricanes. It's just crazy what we've seen, what the world climate, how it's changed and how unstable and unpredictable it's become. And climate-related issues have really dominated all of the top 5 long-term risks in terms of likelihood in the World Economic Forum Global Risk Report. And then again, I'd encourage you, if you want to, there is a link here to a video, climate risk video. You're welcome to have a look at it, which just really talks about the top risks that we're facing around the world. And it's not an immediate risk necessarily in the sort of short term, but in the next 10 years or so, it actually will end up practically impacting at least a quarter of the world's population live next to coastal regions, and they'll have to migrate away from that. And where will they end up living, and how will that impact the rest of the world and such mass migration? It'll impact all the businesses that are operating in that region, etc. So it's something that's real practical that we all need to consider. And having so much sun on the African continent, we certainly have an opportunity to have wind turbine farms, have solar farms, and actually become a solution for the world's challenge around climate change. So a big opportunity for us as women to create new jobs, new opportunities in that space. And then also just another wonderful insight on how the UN wants to plant urban forests that are 4 times the size of Hong Kong to fight climate change. So they're erecting these buildings, and they've got urban forests essentially being put up on each balcony. You've got greenery on the rooftops, you've got greenery. And so in many of the cities around the world, they're ending up trying to approach it slightly differently, wanting to make sure that they have green innovation built into the economy, into the societies, and the way that they design buildings. So the architects have to now also have some type of landscaping skills so that they understand how to work with plants, etc., because it has to be a hybrid type building, not just using glass and steel and all those sorts of elements, but also bringing in some plants and greenery into the design. And then I wanted to just leave you with a couple of thoughts and a toolkit of how can we lead with heart. Each and every one of us on this call today is the first element is I feel we can focus on triple bottom line and then also focus on cognitive diversity. And I'll explain it just now. When we talk about triple bottom line, for me, it's really about people and planet. So we spoke earlier about this, the E and the S. So the planet being the E and the S being the people. And I've deliberately put people first because I think we have to have a people first approach and not an environmental first approach. It doesn't help if we just want to now create just environmentally friendly products and we have half the world or more than 50% of the world's population in poverty. That won't work. We can't just focus on the planet. It has to be a balanced approach of people and planet. And then I've scratched out profit because I think profit will follow if you're clear about your purpose. So when we talk about triple bottom line, it really is about people, planet, and purpose. And when you're clear about wanting to prioritize your people that work with you in your organization, the people that you're affecting in your societies, and also have a positive impact on the environment, even when you're a miner, you're mining gold, you're mining platinum, whatever the case might be, wanting to give back to the communities in your region, doesn't mean you have to now close down the mines. You can run your mine in a more sustainable way. And then the mindset of futures leaders from a report that I extracted is wanting to be curious, leaders that are resilient, that can respond to the ever-changing world that we live in, having a we mentality, not just focusing on myself, and also being flexible, understanding that the circumstances today might not be the same as the circumstances tomorrow. So we can't work in a clearly defined template. And then the cognitive diversity one, it really talks to the concept of making sure that you've got enough mixture of individuals around the table. You'll see a picture of both men and women around the table from different races, different cultural backgrounds, different qualifications. You want to make sure that you've got a well-diversified team that can all check and challenge each other. And then I've included this little Goldilocks chart just to also remind you, there's a study from World Economic Forum that says your sort of sweet spot of making sure that you have the most cognitive diversity in the room is somewhere between 14 and 19 people. So these large organizations with thousands of people in the room, you become so unproductive. You have to make sure that you also keep small, agile, productive teams, but making sure that they're well diversified. And then a thought I wanted to also just plant a seed today is it's the first time in our history that companies are employing individuals from 5 different generations simultaneously. And it's because the silent generations, the ones that have come out of the war times, are actually becoming older, staying part of the employment force longer. You've got the baby boomers that came just after the war times, the Gen Xers that were the ones that had the first TVs and those sorts of things, the millennials like myself that grew up with technology, with cell phones and laptops and things. As we were starting to get into university, we had them. I'm one of the older millennials. The younger ones grew up with the tech from the start. And then the Gen Zs that have grown up with social media and Twitter and Facebook and all those sorts of platforms. And then the Gen Alphas, the ones that are coming behind us that are very soon going to be in the work environment. And is your organization prepared to have different leadership styles for the different individuals from different generations? And do you have enough cognitive diversity around the table that you don't just have a bunch of millennials and they've got a different approach? You need to have different insights and value the insights that those different generations bring. And so I'll leave you with one last question, and you're welcome to pop in the comment box. How much gender, racial, cultural, and industry or sectoral diversity is there in your teams, in your organization? Have you got that sort of diversity? Emilia spoke a little bit earlier. I mean, if we look at the stockbroking fraternity, we'd be gracious when we say, or generous when we say there's at least 20% of women around the table, probably more sort of 10% of women. And then how much diversity do you really have from a racial perspective? So really a challenge still globally. And as I said, things that we're wanting to focus on from both the World Federation of Exchanges side, the Women in ETFs chapter, CFA Society, all of us are doing different elements and wanting to make sure that we foster a more diverse society. So I'll leave you with this thought, be bold and be brave and leave with confidence. It's the statue of that fearless girl in New York. And I think it's so important for all of us to face the Wall Street bull and make sure that when we're talking, specifically given we're talking to the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange today from a stock market perspective, we want to make sure that we find a place for both men and women in leadership roles at the stock exchange level, being able to contribute to financial literacy, to knowledge, to wealth creation, and build a more sustainable society. So thank you so much for your time, and I will open up if there are any questions. I hope you've seen the end. I'm seeing some, thanks Delphine. I see to Nicola's point about balance, a powerful insight I recently gained is that we feel imbalance in our lives when we don't feel our values in all aspects of our lives. The point being that if, for example, an individual values care, love, courage, integrity, authenticity, etc., then these values must be lived in all aspects of one's life, whether in work, home, towards self. If this is maintained, then there is a true sense of alignment and a much deeper understanding of balance is experienced. Just thought to share this. Thanks. Thanks so much, Delphine. And then Kumbo, I see, just out of curiosity, how is the Ukraine and Russia war affecting the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange? So I won't be able to answer that one. I'm going to ask Emilia if she's still on the line, if she is able to answer that one, or Tapiwa.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you for your presentation. There's a lot that we actually need to look at, especially the aspect on ESG. So just to take a look at Kumbu's question, which is just out of curiosity, how has the Ukraine and Russia war affected the Zimbabwe Stock Exchange? So at the moment, we haven't actually seen the market react to the war as yet, but I'm sure you've seen that oil prices have started going up. So just from that alone, we're probably going to start to see prices may actually start going up in terms of companies that would use up a lot of fuel. So because of that, the prices go up. The likelihood is that the stock market as well is going to affect the listed companies as well. That being said, we might also just start to see the rates start to go up, which can easily translate into the market starting to also pick up, prices also picking up in the market as well. So I don't know whether that helps, but also just feel free to contact myself, and then we can just talk more around the market and what we're seeing at the moment in the market. Currently, the market is very weak, but we might start to see the market picking up.
Emilia, I see Kumbo's just asking a follow-up question. So in other words, should people start to buy, hold, or sell?
Good. Well, given how the market is at the moment, the market is fairly weak. So it looks like a market where it's more net selling, selling and hold. I wouldn't know about buying at the moment, but it's more or less selling at the moment. I think I just had a question, Nicole. I think you touched a bit on gender neutral parenting leave. I found that quite interesting because that's not something that we hear quite often. I just wanted to ask, what strides have we made as a continent in terms of getting that gender neutral parental leave? And like I mentioned earlier, that flexible work hours is some initiative that can actually be made for more women to actually be retained in the capital market. What sort of strides, and also where do you think we're going, and when do you think we can actually accomplish that?
Thanks, Emilia. Look, I think it's something where we have certainly been one of the leaders in that space. Since we've announced the news in 2020, we've actually seen a couple of other financial services institutions in South Africa follow suit. But it is something that is certainly not a global trend. You see some of the Nordic markets have quite an advanced approach where they offer about a year annual leave to both the mother and the father, and they can share amongst themselves in terms of how much leave they'd want to take to raise their child within that year. And I know the German market has a similar approach. So there are some countries in the world that is a bit more advanced in terms of this, and does value having both the woman and the father involved in raising the child. But yeah, it really is not something that we've seen globally across the world as a trend yet. So we wanted to do it because we felt that it's important to lead on the sustainability front. We've got to put our mouth where, money where our mouth is, and we need to make sure that practically we are actually becoming leaders in that space and making sure that we lead on the front of gender equality. Great, thanks, Emilia. Kumbush just asked for further queries. Would you be in a position to drop your contact details? So please do drop it in the comment box, or I don't know, Tapiwa, whether we'll be sharing it afterwards. But guys, yeah, if there aren't any more questions, then I will just thank you. And I think it's been a wonderful morning. And thanks so much, Tapiwa, for the invitation and for partnering with both the CFA Society as well as Women in ETFs, and being part of this movement across the world with hundreds of exchanges that rang the bell for gender equality, and just have such a rich conversation this morning about that. So I'll hand back to our host. I see Delphine's added another comment. I don't know, Delphine, if you wanted to voice that over just before you presented.
Sure. Sorry, sure. I'm happy to do that when I start, but I'll hand back to Tapiwa first.
Thank you very much, Nicola. I'm sure Maria is still in. Maria?
Yes, Tapiwa.
Okay.
Thank you very much, Nicola. So now we're proceeding to our next speaker, Delphine. I will begin by giving an intro of Delphine's bio. Delphine Govender is a CFA Society South Africa board member and member of the Women in Investments Management Committee. She is the founder, owner, manager, and chief investment officer at Perpetua Investment Managers. Delphine spent 11 years at Allan Gray Limited before leaving to start Perpetua, which she believes is a model for the next generation of investment management firms in South Africa. Since inception 6 years ago, Perpetua has grown to a firm of 30 staff and managing assets of 13 billion rand. Delphine is a qualified chartered accountant and CFA charter holder. Over to you, Delphine.
Thank you so much, Maria. And also thank you to the ZSE for the invitation to speak and represent the CFA Society. I really just have excuse me, I really just have a couple of minutes to just bring a bit of perspective to CFA Society South Africa, what it represents, who we are, and also how potentially, listeners today can become part of the society, but also can benefit from what CFA Society offers and the CFA Institute offers in the world. In fact, when I joined the CFA Society board a couple of years ago, I think it was 3 years ago, one of the biggest kind of pull factors to becoming involved was particularly to participate in the Women in Investment Management component and the Diversity Subcommittee, which is a board subcommittee that I chair. So I'm really happy to be able to represent at this event today. Just in terms of, it's a very content-rich presentation, so I won't really, and nor do I have the time to go through it all, but just for those of you that are not familiar with the CFA is a global institute, an association of investment professionals. It is commonly regarded as probably, the gold standard association or organization in the world for investments. It is also commonly known as the one that sets the bar for professional excellence, and very much a champion of ethical behavior in investment markets. It's probably best known for what you and I and those on the call today might be aware of, which is the CFA Charter Holder Qualification or Designation, which is a set of 3 levels of exams, CFA level 1, 2, and 3, and then at the end of it, a requirement for appropriate work experience that then enables you to obtain your CFA charter. It's therefore known to be quite a respected source of knowledge around topics in the financial community. At the moment, there's over 177,000 charter holders across 160 markets, and in fact, the CFA Society South Africa, as you'll see below, which includes obviously professionals in the SADC region, hence the fact that the CFA Society South Africa also services Zimbabwe as an example. We have 2,000 charter holders across our society, which is actually quite meaningful. One of the things I guess is most important to understand is that the mission and the purpose of our own society is really very aligned to the Global Institute's mission, which is really to promote the highest standards of ethics, education, and professional excellence. The most important addition to this mission over the last decade, particularly post the global financial crisis, is that it's not a society that only believes it exists to only serve its members. Actually, we're looking to develop members such that that phrase in the middle of that bullet point says it's really for the ultimate benefit of society. We exist as an industry of investments because we are entrusted with the role of taking care of other people's money. So it's the ultimate form of stewardship. And as we've come to understand, and as Nicola really articulated in her presentation, is that our role as investors is not simply a job about saying, should I invest in a stock? Will it go up? Should I invest in a stock, or should I avoid a stock because it's going to go down? There's a much deeper element of the trickle-down effects of the capital allocation decision. And really one of the biggest shifts is to understand as investors and as an investor community, how one assesses one's role in your contribution in this regard. And particularly from a CFA Society's point of view, from a South Africa point of view, but for the SADC region, we really look to discharge that responsibility and obligation with relevance to our region. Naturally, the CFA Institute is a very US-centric organization, and so we found that a big value proposition we bring as a society is to really bring the perspectives of what it means to be an investment professional on the African continent, as an example, particularly in the SADC region. Just some couple of things that we are also known for. We really are focused on driving industry initiatives, and I'll talk you through one or two, particularly on the women in investments front. Very passionate about really lifelong learning as an organization and encouraging professional development and continuing education. And then also to become a platform for facilitating idea exchange, something like this as an example, to participate in these and many more. And then also importantly to, again, this sort of event to really further the public's understanding of the CFA designation and what the obligation of a CFA charter holder is as well. So just a couple of quick facts, as I mentioned, We've over 2,000 members in the SADC region. 10% of our members are actually outside South Africa, so it includes the regions like Zimbabwe, Botswana, Namibia, Malawi, and Swaziland. We're also the 5th largest society in the EMEA region. The society is represented by a small office of, excuse me, full-time executive staff, which is run by an executive officer and about 3 or 4, administrators who operate, in running the organization. But primarily, the strategy is managed by 12 board members, of which I'm one. And really, it's a completely volunteer position, and it's really part of a calling almost to be part of the change we wish to see in terms of the societal benefit improvements that we'd like and the role we believe investment professionals should play. So, some of the outreach events I think that you might have become aware of is that, particularly in Sub-Saharan Africa, is that we're really looking to grow the number of candidates and CFA charter holders, particularly those that have not yet formed societies of their own. And through this, some of the programs we run, which hopefully you'll become more aware of, are annual capacity building workshops, professional learning initiatives, and then quite a lot of CFA program candidate support. And then also something that Nicola alluded to, which is the Women's Investment Management Scholarship, particularly aimed at increasing the number of women charter holders across the region. And I can tell you more, direct you to about that. Some of the core goals for the society in the SADC region is that we really have obviously 4 pillars, I would say. The one is obviously to ensure that the society itself is sustainable, so it can, participate and make the changes that it believes in terms of delivering on its mission. So the key elements of that actual mission are to build market integrity, develop future professionals, and deliver member value. And so just really briefly, what does that mean in reality? A big part of the CFA's Institute's mission is to develop and administer codes of best practice and guidelines. These tend to be quite important in terms of being, essential markers and essential guides that themselves actually become, the standards that practitioners actually implement, whether it's on performance measurement and a whole host of other guides. Right now, one of the most topical areas is on ESG disclosure, and that's a current standard that's just been released globally that can be applied across the world. And this year there'll be a diversity and inclusion code that's actually going to be released that will be championed by the CFA Institute, that really looks to ensure that as an industry, firms within the industry and professionals within the industry have a framework for how to, in practice, implement some of these very topical and important aspects. In South Africa, we feel that we have a very important role, and so unsurprisingly, a strong relationship, for example, with bodies like the ZSE, but a very important role of representing member interests in terms of engagement, outreach, and support of all the regulatory bodies. So whether it would be the FSCA, which is our Financial Services Conduct Authority, and a variety of other regulatory bodies. We also believe, importantly, that as an organization that stands for ethics, we train, we do ethics training for the industry. A lot of it is almost free of charge as such, because we believe it's, having that impact. And then lastly, an area that's become, very topical, particularly in the last couple of years, a lot of advocacy around ESG and responsible investing. On the future professionals, that's really typically current students that are in university or the young professionals that we really want to encourage to become investment professionals of the future. And through this, we do university outreach to really bring awareness to the fact that, the CFA, designation exists, that it is the global gold standard of qualification for the investment industry, what it means, the ability to become significantly more employable in the investment industry should you have it, how do you go about it, what it entails. So there's both industry awareness that we do, and then also the CFA charter holder awareness. We have quite a lot of support in terms of the CFA programs. And one of the more exciting things that we also do, which has a lot of take up and hopefully can be extended well beyond South African universities, is we do a local university research challenge once a year, where groups of university students, either in final year of their undergrad or typically in their honors year, really come together and they research a share that is picked And then that is presented in groupings, and in fact, the winning team goes to compete globally. So really great way of getting individuals particularly involved in understanding how both the CFA Institute, but also the investment industry comes to life. I guess most excitingly, from once you become a member, and importantly, we have two options of membership. It's not simply, while the majority of our members naturally are charter holders themselves, you are able to also join up as an investment industry professional who might not be a charter holder, and you take out what's called a local membership, and that's also available on the CFA Society website. Some of the things that we would deliver member value, particularly in terms of outside of South Africa, online webinars, a fantastic treasure trove of incredible masterclasses that typically are all CPD verifiable. We use a service provider, Asset TV, and so everything is there for posterity and can be watched on demand. Quite a lot of now, thankfully, back in person program events, networking opportunities, and I think also wanted to underline significant scope for volunteer opportunities. A lot of investment people feel strongly about wanting to give back or participate in how they can shift and move the needle for the industry, but perhaps don't have time to commit to an entire board role, etc. But within the various strategic subcommittees, for example, you might just be interested in ESG, you might just be interested in delivering, in developing the next generation of professionals, or just be interested in women in investment management. There's a scope to volunteer as well by any investment professional. And just lastly, is to really just speak about the women in investment management, which is very much an aspect of the delivering member value component. But as much as it is, we also see it to also develop future professionals, so we can really grow the pipeline of future women professionals that might become charter holders, but specifically join the investment industry and specifically in roles that have to do with investment decision making, as opposed to not simply just the operational roles. So this is something that fortunately comes from the top. So the Institute globally is one that has kind of identified women in investment management as a massive focus area and initiative over the last several years. And locally in our society, we do quite a lot that is aimed predominantly at increasing the number of women charter holders. While it's not so much about the obsession about the qualification or the designation, it's more about saying by increasing the number of women charter holders, you're also increasing the number of women that actually work within the investment industry, particularly in the roles of money management and the investment decision making. So that's really how we see the connection. We also think it's essential that we create demand for diversity as an industry imperative. And one of the important things we do is that we promote the CFA Institute's Women's Scholarship, which is a very meaningful program. So at the moment, if you are a new individual that's looking to sign up to take the CFA exam, you typically have to pay a $450 enrollment fee, and then an annual exam fee of either between $700 or $1,000, depending on whether you take the early bird discount. Now, if you apply for the CFA Institute's Women's Scholarship Program, you actually have the entire enrollment fee waived of $450, and you only pay around $350 for the actual exam. So it's a very meaningful scholarship. And just to flag for those of you that might be interested, this scholarship is open annually and it closes at the end of March, typically every year. So it actually closes in 2 weeks' time. So do encourage that you go to the CFA Society website, even if you just Google it, click on the link under scholarships, and you'll find all the details there and you can apply. And then lastly, something that I'm particularly excited about, I was just giving you showcasing some of the initiatives. This was just last year. We in our third or fourth year of quite exciting initiatives. Interestingly, Nicola, you ended with the Fearless goal. In fact, fearlessness was our theme last year as CFA Society South Africa. And these were just some of the elements we showcased. We really see our role as being as having impact at multiple areas. So it's firstly to showcase the hero stories of women in the industry that have really broken through the glass ceiling. We think it's super important to actually provide some of that support and professional development, as well as personal development support for individuals that are perhaps more senior in the industry, whether senior mentoring or then young professionals. How do we encourage them to stay in the industry? It's hard. It's a tough industry. It's tough for men, not just women, but women, particularly in the minority, find some of it even harder. And then also critically, one of the most exciting initiatives that we launched last year was to really take the pipeline all the way back to school. So last year, on the International Day of the Girl, which was 11th of October, the CFA Society South Africa held our first job shadow program, because while we would love for this to be physical in future, last year it had to be virtual, but it was fantastic. We had, over 650 to 700 young girls in grades of the equivalent of grade, 10, 11, etc., in schools to our program, where we really just took them through what is the investment industry about. And so that was a really exciting launch initiative, which we hope to continue in the year ahead. So that's just really a little snippet from me. I just had a couple of minutes to give you some insights and hopefully tweak your interest in the CFA Society, and really look forward to seeing many more charter holders emerging from Zimbabwe, obviously. So thank you for that. I'm also happy to take any questions if they are. I see there's a question in the chat from Kumbu, who said, I've noted on CFA, I've noted the ZSE is overwhelmed with retail investors from other professionals, including vendors. Does the organization welcome them? So, typically, any individual who has the underlying base qualification, so typically the CFA qualification is seen as almost a postgraduate equivalent. So you would need to have some sort of base, undergraduate degree in terms of the criteria of CFA exam charter holder requirements, but it's open to anybody. There are many in South Africa that I know of, for example, just individual retail investors who themselves have decided to become CFA charter holders. Understandably, it's typically something that's geared to people that work in the profession. So the majority of people who take the exam typically are individuals that are working in the profession per se. I wonder if there are any more questions, Maria. Otherwise, I'm happy to end there. I know we're over time, Melissa.
Thank you very much, Delphine. I do not see any other questions in our chat box, so I think it means it's all clear.
Great. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Delphine. I will hand over to Tapiwa, who will give us the vote of thanks.
Thank you very much, Maria, and thank you very much, Delphine, for the presentation. For myself, I really learned a lot today, and I would want to take this opportunity to thank everyone that attended. Thank you to all our guests. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules to come through and also attend this webinar. In addition, I would like to thank our partner today, who is the CFA Society South Africa, represented by Lucille. I think she's in the meeting. I saw her. I don't know whether you want to say a few words after me, Lucille, so that you can just greet our guests. But thank you very much for joining us today. And thank you very much to our first presenter, who was Emilia, who shared her journey with us as a female in the capital markets and how she has overcome all the hurdles. Thank you very much for that insightful presentation. And also thank you very much to Nicola for the insightful presentation. I think we will also share the presentation to all the guests that are here present. And to Delphine, thank you very much for telling us more about the CFA Society and how we can also become members. I think it was very insightful. And for any other contributions, I think people can, if you can just maybe share your contact details in the chat box for everyone that would want to engage with you after this meeting. Same for Nicola and same for Emilia as well, if you can just share your details in the chat box. But I think I'll also just share them with everyone. And I would also like to thank Maria, who was our moderator for today. Thank you very much, Maria, for steering the ship and for making sure that the webinar ran smoothly. To all the women and the gentlemen that were in this webinar, once again, thank you very much, and I wish you a very good day. And as we approach the weekend, a restful weekend. Thank you very much and enjoy your day.
Thanks so much, Tapiwa. Thanks, Emilia.